Yeah, we'll race him because he ain't gonna be here. He'll be dead by then and we'll be shed of him. It was a tragic moment in drag racing, but it turned for real good because there had been rear engine cars, but they had never, like I said, they never amounted to anything. And so I went to work on it, and it took 3 months to work the bugs out. And finally we made a change in the steering. That's all it was. That was the problem. They had to have real slow steering because they were so sensitive versus the slingshot. You could do a slingshot like this and it didn't do nothing. You do a rear engine car like that and it drives off the drag strip. And so once I got that squared away, I went to California, and that was so funny because I arrived, I had built, in the meantime, I had stopped work on the rear engine car. We tested for 3 months and it hadn't done anything, and I'm within a couple of weeks having to go to California, and I was under a $100,000 contract with the American Hot Rod Association, $10,000 an event, 10 races, and that was their opener at Long Beach, just where I'd lost my foot the year before. And I couldn't get down the drag strip, so we snapped together a slingshot, Swamp Rat 15. It was just about finished. My wife walked out into the shop, said, "What is this?" And she knew what it was because there was no orders had come in for any cars.
That was just her tone of disapproval?
Right. I said, "Well, that's my car for next year." I said, "In 2 weeks, we got to be in California." She said, "You would get back in one of these things after it's mutilated you like this?" I said, "Honey, this is what I do." I said, "There's no transmission in this car. This is high gear only." She says, "Of the 6 guys that have been killed in these cars in the last 2 years, not one had a transmission." She says, "There's 100 things back there to kill you. You're sitting in back of a bomb." She says, "Now," I said, "I haven't got down the drag strip in this rear engine car yet." And she said, "If there's anybody on this planet that can make this work, it's you. Now get back on it." So we load everything up and we go to the drag strip the next day again, and we're jacking with tire pressures and everything in the back, and it just right off the drag strip just like normal, you know. We were testing at Bithlow, which is the Orlando Speed World now, and there was no guardrails on the end of the drag strip in these days. The guardrails were over in front of the grandstands on each side. You had about 100 foot of dirt to go off on, and that made this all possible because I could go out there and spin around and everything was fine. Today you couldn't do it because you'd hit that concrete barrier every time you crash your car, and you wouldn't hit that but a couple of times. You won't do it anymore. So anyway, we're coming back, and I'm setting shotgun, I call it, over in the passenger seat. TC's in the middle and Swingle's driving, Connie Swingle. And I'm like this, and I said, if I didn't know better, I'd think the steering was too fast. But that can't be it, because that steering is off that slingshot just exactly the way it was on that car, only it's just up front now. And Swingle said, "This ain't a slingshot, this is a front driver. If you think the steering's too fast, we'll just slow it down." So we went home that night, we made the arms longer on the spindles, and the pitman arm on the steering shorter. Went back to the next day. We actually changed it from about 6-1 to 10-1. Went back to the drag strip the next day, went straight as a string. But the surprise was it went 6.86, and the track record was 6.85 by the Ram Chargers, the baddest of all for setting low ET of the meet. They always came in with a low guy and set the record. And there we'd run within 100th of that time on this first run, and we didn't even have any nitro in the car to speak of. We couldn't get it all loaded up fast enough to get to California. But what are we going to do with this fancy brand new slingshot we just built? The phone rings. It's Goodyear. He said, "We got a panic deal going on here. We need a car at the Los Angeles Coliseum this next weekend because the one we were going to have there can't be there. Do you have anything?" I said, "I got this brand new slingshot I just finished." And I said, "It's got a chrome roll cage, and we could put a dummy engine in it, and you wouldn't know it wasn't real. How much do you want for it?" I said, $7,500. how much to bring it out there? I said, another $2,500. They said, we'll wire you the money.
Oh my goodness.
And so we put the slingshot in this tiny little trailer, and we took the rear engine car all apart, hung the chassis in the ceiling, and the rear end over in one corner. That we didn't have a spare engine, so we just put the engine out of it in the spare engine rack, and the body panels were just nothing. They just laid on the floor wrapped in blankets. And to California we went. In the middle of the night.
And you drove?
Yeah, oh yeah, me and TC. Yeah. And Swingle didn't go. He stayed there. We had some work had to be done. But me and TC by ourselves went to California. And we pulled into Waterman shop in the middle of the night. And the big race is going to be this weekend now at Long Beach. And Sid Waterman comes out with a couple of the racers. Have you got the rear engine car? I said, oh yeah, where is it? I opened the little side door on the trailer, and I had a flashlight, no big lights, and I shine in here on the slingshot, all the new fancy slingshot. Oh boy, we knew it wouldn't work. That's great. We don't have to build new cars for this year. And so we shut the door, drove over to the Coliseum, dropped off the car at the Goodyear booth, and went to the motel and got some sleep. Headed out to the Long Beach the next morning, and who should be at the front gate but Jim Tice, the guy that signs the $10,000 check each time. He said, have you got the rear engine car? I said, yeah. He said, let's see it. So I opened up the door, and there ain't nothing in there.
Some blankets on the floor.
Blankets on the floor, rear end laying over here, and then there was a frame hung in the top, a bare frame. And I said, we're going to put it together right here. And I mean, he got mad. He said, let me tell you something, Garlits. He said, this is the professional series of drag racing. This was before the NHR even really had the big points deal and all, And he says, we're professionals, and we've got a lot of money on the television and radio ads on you, and we are very disappointed that you would show up with something like this so unprofessional. I said, well, it's going to look pretty good once we get it together. He said, well, put it together right out here by the front gate so that when the spectators come through here, they'll see you and at least see the signs on the trailer that you're here. Now, the racetrack was a half a mile down the road. It was way down in there. So this is where we are, and this is where all the crowd was gathering, right? And every racer that come through had us stop and took a look at it. And the snake comes in there, Perdone. And he walks around that thing, and he looks at it. And he said, well, I guess this is one way to get publicity. In other words, if you can't race anymore, just build something stupid. Right. And so he goes down to the pits, and they assemble all the top fuel guys down there. And they said, and they had just had this terrible accident at Long Beach with Pat Foster driving an experimental rear engine car. It crashed in the lights, and he was laying over in the Pacific Coast Hospital recovering. They all went this way or the other in the lights, and nobody knew why. And of course, if you're sitting beside him, it'd just run right over you. And he said, you know what's going to happen, don't you? And the guy says, no, what's going to happen, Snake? He says, well, he's going to be right out there because he has good motors. He says it's going to turn right or left. If it happens to turn toward us, it's going to run right into us. It's going to be a big crash. What are we going to do about it, Snake? He says, let's don't race him. How are we going to do that? Well, we all got to stick together. We'll go to management and tell them if they let him run, we won't run. And they can't run it with just him. So they went to C.J. Hart, the track manager, and they told him that. And they said, I agree with that, because poor old C.J. Hart was the one that had pulled Pat Foster out of the wreckage in the test deal. They don't like that, So, but Tice had the track rented, the president of AHRA, and he had the final say. So then they went to Tice, and they told him what they wanted. And then he says, boys, he was the Barnum and Bailey of drag racing, the promoter. He says, boys, he says, I got a better idea. Why don't we do this? We'll make Garlits make every qualifying attempt. He's got to make a full run on each qualifying attempt. If he lifts, he has to come back and make another run. If he touches the outer barrier line or the center line on any one of those qualifying attempts, he's in the trailer and goes home. Now, in the unlikely event that he qualifies the car after these 4 attempts and he hasn't hit the barriers and he's in the show, would you race him on Sunday? And it was real quiet. And one of the guys says, yeah, we'll race him because he ain't gonna be here. He'll be dead by then and we'll be shed of him. Yeah, that's a good idea, Mr. Tice, we'll do that. And so I made all my runs single. And I qualified about 3rd in the field. And I went all the way to the final. And I'm in the right lane. It's the same track, the same event, the same day, the same time of the afternoon, and the light goes yellow-green. And just for a minute, I saw that explosion.
Ooh.
And I thought I'd blowed up, but I hadn't. It was deja vu. And I stepped on it, and Gary Cochran was already a half a car out on me. And it pulled right up to him, but it didn't get by. But the rear engine car had arrived. And I won the Winter Nationals the next weekend, and then I went to the Bakersfield and won the U.S. Fuel and Gas Championship and beat the Snake in the semifinal. And it didn't have a wing on it yet. And it was an unbelievable deal.